Okay, so today we have Carly. She has been a real estate agent for, is it 10 years now, Carly, or is it still
Yeah,
9?
it's
10
it's
years.
fun, yeah.
After a career of 16 years as a music teacher, she has lived in Southern Oregon since she was in 5th grade and has built her business in the same community she grew up within. She remembers sitting in 5th grade being asked what she wanted to be when she grew up and distinctively deciding that she wanted to be a teacher. Teaching has been a perfect transition into the real estate world, and helping clients and supporting the success of other agents has been a continuation of that childhood decision to become a teacher. Carly is passionate about Keller Williams, Experience Brokerage Network, and connecting with agents on key components to support successful careers. So you have a great teacher today. Uh, working with buyers and sellers, just what we're here to do. So really important topic. Ask lots of questions, participate. You will always get the most out of the class the more you participate. So glad to see you guys all on here for your Monday, and I'll let her take it away.
Thanks, Mara. All right, well, I'm really happy to see all of you here today. So good job showing up for yourselves ultimately by plugging into what's there for you through Keller Williams. And I will say, I remember actually being exactly in your shoes, 10 years ago and sitting in my own Ignite classes, which back then were only done in person. So it's kind of fun to be on this side of it and be teaching it again. There was a time where I was teaching the full course several years ago, and that was also in person, but now to be here and Zoom with you guys from across our state is awesome. So sounds like a lot of you are doing a good job jumping into your businesses, and it's sort of fun to hear your check-ins. And Dick, I wanted to say something that one of my coworkers used to say is a checkup from the neck up. So I
Oh,
kind of
baby.
like that. Yeah, that visual and that idea. So well, let's go ahead and get started. So I will say I like to feel savvy with tech, but sometimes I'm not as savvy as I think. But so hopefully I don't have any boo-boos here, but can everybody see the slide that's up currently?
Yes.
Okay, great. And let me just flow through here. Okay, so you know who I am, and we're going to go ahead and just jump in on our work with buyers and sellers course. We're going to be moving on in our Transact series. We've covered winning the seller and buyer, and now we are going to move on to talk about how you work with your clients once you have a signed listing or buyer agreement. Basically, what happens between when we have a signed agreement and when you make or receive the offer. Uh, so it's prompting for a daily success check-in, but it sounds like we've already gone through that. But have most people experienced writing an offer? I know everybody's kind of in a different place, but have most people experienced writing an offer and dealing with a transaction, or are we some of us still working on that?
I have not.
I
Still working
haven't
on it.
either.
Okay, all good. Yeah, well, this is good to stay plugged in here. So, um, okay, so let's look at our agenda. We're going to be looking at success with clients, success with buyers, success with sellers, success with co-agents that can play a really big role. And then we'll recap our ahas for today. So at the end of this session, we're going to be able to identify the key information to build success with buyers and sellers. We're going to employ strategies. You're gonna know how to employ strategies to assist buyers and sellers with their decision making. And you're going to be able to build a strong success foundation relationship with their clients and with your clients and co-op agents. So let's consider what questions we might have as we go along, and what you'd like to learn. I'm going to keep moving here. Virtually every top producing agent we have ever worked with has a deep and almost inherent sense of service. They have a servant's heart and place their buyers or sellers' real estate experience above all else. They are always thinking service. So I just have to do a little side note that I saw this really cheesy YouTube. I wish I could actually just pull it up, where there was this little mom and pop store that did their own commercial where they just were dancing around singing service is selling. And it actually kind of stuck with me because it's ultimately true that the service that we give is what sells our ability to help people, but it also is what gets them to where they need to be, gets our clients to where they need to be. So I kind of think that idea of services selling is actually something worth holding on to. The point in the transaction we are focusing on today is the time between getting a signed buyer or listing agreement and receiving or making an offer. However, just as you are going to take aspects of lead generation into the transaction, you'll of course take aspects we discussed today through and past closing. Our first topic is success with clients. Let's cover the things you can do with buyers and sellers to make this process as transparent and smooth for them as possible. So, great agent / client communication provides a strong foundation for sustaining relationships. Sets and manages expectations proactively throughout the transaction, creates peace of mind for our clients, and enhances our own credibility. The key to success with clients is communication. We've covered this in many ways so far, including the assistance that Command and the KW app provide in making sure you're communicating with value to our sphere of influence, leads, and clients. And great communication is the foundation for great relationships with our clients. So remember, they're trusting us with what is likely their biggest financial decision and what will serve as the foundation of their lives and the lives of their family. So look at your participant guide. I don't have that in front of me. I have my own stuff in front of me, but it might just be helpful as you track along. Yeah, I will just say a side note of just every time I've sort of thought through and analyzed a transaction or even just a kind of bump in the road in a transaction and thought about what maybe could have gone differently or what I could do better next, there's always some form of really ultimately some form of communication that could have taken place that either would have spoken to that particular client better or could have laid groundwork for this steps to come that would have helped them get through a bottleneck area a little bit better. And so I just want to encourage us to think along the lines of, while I don't, we don't want to ourselves stress out about every little detail. I think it's helpful to know that there's things that we can control, and setting up communication really does help with not just your transaction being smooth, but the relationship we aim to build from there forward too, and holding ourselves accountable to if there's something else we could have communicated along the way, or if there's a better way we could have communicated it. And I'm going to take one step deeper in that in detail that I'm sure all of us probably feel like we learn best, like through maybe a particular avenue, whether it's visual or whether it's by listening or whether it's by example. But those are ways in which we can think, how can I connect with this particular client or these particular decision makers better in a way that they personally can receive the message from us? And I think that's a place that we can really provide a better service is getting to know our clients in those ways better, and then communicating with them in the language that really speaks to them. There's kind of infinite possibilities, but the good news is that you can also set up repeatable systems in that. So if you're creating something to really speak to like a visual learner, it doesn't have to be just a one-time effort just to speak to that particular learner. You can create something that you can duplicate and tailor to each individual situation, by a little bit. So I just want to put that out there for people who may not have thought about that. So it's important to recognize that you can rarely over communicate with clients. This is a complicated process that they will only navigate a few times in their lives. You will continually set expectations and keep everyone on track with your communication. And as we've mentioned, Command and your KW app are here to help automate that process. Is anybody using Command and KW app to help automate with like the communication process and some of that, and feel like speaking on that? Okay, all good.
will, a list.
Oh, yeah?
I haven't had a chance to use it because I don't have a client yet.
But you will be. You'll be
Sure,
ready.
definitely. I mean, like without automation, you cannot handle multiple clients, obviously.
Yeah, automation is a big thing. And I have to just say on that note, I am actually really passionate about all of this. But on that note, if yes, we need to be in action and talking to people in whatever way that works for you, in order to kind of discover, possible leads and where people are at and build those relationships. But if you're finding that you're not just full of transactions right now, take that time to get yourself set up. I promise you, you will not regret that. It's really actually sort of uncomfortable to be in business without that foundation set up. I've personally had to experience that. So I tend to like to just grab the next thing that happens. And it's hard for me to sometimes slow myself down and really put the necessary foundation in place. And I've experienced, that discomfort. And so like, if you find yourself not being as busy as you would like right now, do take that time, if you have it, to keep building the foundation that you're learning about through this. So the 3 levels of service, in addition to the 4 underlying ideas you need all your communication with clients to convey, let's remind ourselves of the 3 levels of service from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Does anybody know what that's referring to, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent?
Gary's book.
I
Yeah.
have the book, I just haven't read it yet.
Okay. So good job. So also, I'm calling myself out because I feel like I like to help with perception in these groups. Like back when I was, a new agent, and to be honest, like I'm going to be super transparent. I was really afraid because it wasn't just about real estate. It was just that we totally like jumped off a cliff. My husband and I worked together, so that's the we part of it. And he quit his full-time job. I quit part of what I had been doing, and I was a music teacher, and I had a private studio, as well as I was teaching some classes at a charter school. And I quit the charter school part of it. I mean, we like jumped off a cliff. So I was like really, really invested in needing to make things work. And going back to what I was gonna say is just reading the book, kind of like I had it the whole time and then didn't read it for years. And there is a lot of value in there. So I just want to encourage people to do it.
17-inch, that's what it's a big one.
Somebody is unmuted
I
there.
used to use it for school, so that
Let me just see. There we go. Okay, so remember, by keeping these levels in mind, you will serve your clients to the highest level possible. So 1, our purpose. Masters of service have a clear understanding of why they should be hired and can articulate it to anyone at any time. Great service begins with a clear purpose for why someone should work with us. I think that I often have side notes, so I hope that they're helpful. But I think actually I want to do my side note with the second one too. So number 2, value proposition. The best agents can translate their purpose and why people should hire them into a specific set of services they will provide. And I'll just do my side note after number 3 too. So fiduciary. Highly productive agents provide a level of service based on their commitment to act as a fiduciary for their clients. They place their clients' interests above all others, even their own. A fiduciary brings a level of care and trust to the relationship that a functional agent does not. So I have a question for us, and actually, I'm going to ask it, but then I just have to let my dog in for a second. So, my question is, okay, when we think about our purpose and understanding why we should be hired, and when we think about our value proposition, I just want to leave you with a question for like 30 seconds while I go let my dog in. Is what does that mean to each of us individually? So we get asked a lot, or at least the idea is out there, why should I hire you? What makes you special? And to be quite honest, like I have a thought in mind, but part of that is because I feel like we can name like a list of different things, but it could actually sound exactly like everybody else because we're working with a model. So I want to push us to think a little bit about what truly sets you apart. And I'm going to go let my dog in really quickly. I'll be right back. Okay, so does anybody have some thoughts you want to share on that question? What sets you apart? What makes you the person they're going to choose?
I think for myself, I'm a people person. I can read people's body language and everything very easily and their reactions, and so I can tell when something maybe not be sitting quite right that they're not ready to address. I'm
Okay.
also a good problem solver, so able to think outside of the box and come up with something that other people usually wouldn't because they're stuck inside that box.
Okay, I like that, Stacy. And I want to add on to that, and you might be doing this already, but I just want to encourage you to either keep doing it and keep digging deeper, or to think along the lines of how you can express that, not just in words. Like we want to be able to express that in words, but also through either systems or protocols or ways in which that actually will be supporting that quality will be supporting your clients. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but does anybody else want to share your thoughts on what makes you the person that stands out or gets hired?
I've been thinking about that quite a bit since I've had my license for about 8-9 months and I haven't done anything with it.
You're here.
I'm here. So for right now, the one thing I can come up with is dedication,
Okay.
because since I have nobody else, nobody else that I'm helping, no other buyers or sellers or anything, like I can dedicate 100% of my time and focus to my client. But that's not going to work for when I have a bunch of people. So, but for right now, that's what I have.
Okay, so Shannon, I mean, that's great, and it's true, right? So one thing that comes to mind to me in hearing you say that is just making sure that we are seeing the opportunity for our clients within every stage of where we're at. And we may not word it we always want to word it in a way that really shows our support and our dedication to their process. But you may have heard this, but like that the idea that there's opportunity in every market, meaning there are always people who either need to buy and sell, or if we have when there is a big crash in the bursting of the bubble, which was actually before my time in real estate, but I was a homeowner then. And there were investors picking up properties, doing fix and flips, and that opportunity was there for them. So there's always going to be people who are either needing to move or looking to move in each kind of market. And it's kind of the same with who we are as agents at any given time, is there's always an opportunity to maximize and optimize what we can do for our clients and how we communicate that. But I want to give a chance for anybody else one other person who might want to share some ideas on that, on why you should be hired.
When I think about this, I think in customer service
Okay.
and how I can give that better customer service for my clients. And I think in quick answers and resolve everything and answer all the calls. And in few words is stay there every single time.
Okay. And can you repeat that last piece that you just said?
Stay there. When my client needs something, okay, answer the phone, answer the email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important, right? So I will say I have a friend who bought this business a while ago. And first order of business for him and getting it up and running and more profitable was just having his people answer the phone. And so that's a really big one, right? Being available, ideally without it running your life in a way that doesn't work for you, but being available for our clients and being there when they need us. So I'm going to propose on the heels of this, I think fits with everything people have shared, that our greatest uniqueness is exactly in who we uniquely are, right? None of us are each other, and we all have ways to express who we are and what matters to us and what our standards are, that we all have ways to express that ultimately are unique. I mean, so like just to take a basic idea, my touch like points for what I feel are valued to clients or my clientele might look a little bit different than somebody else's, even though we're both running some kind of touch system, right? So we can take a model and we still have it. We each have it and we're each running it. That sounds the same, but there is something within it that's reflective of who we are as individuals, what our standards are, and how we want to communicate with our clientele. So I just want to encourage you to take a deep dive on maybe 5 things that you feel really define you or your standards. And we can kind of infinitely grow out from each of those 5 things in terms of what we provide as a service or how we communicate to our clients. And you might find inspiration around some of that you didn't think about before, but you are what makes your business unique and stand out, and how we leverage those qualities of who we are. Okay.
Okay. Oh, do you still want
Go
to
ahead.
get
Go
some?
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So in my my proposition was like I am in Thai, I'm Thai bilingual Thai and English communications, and my target market will be Thai community who live in the US and also Thai people who would love to invest in the US. So
Mhm.
I can help facilitate the transactions of buying and selling or investment. I have a little bit of background in short-term rental, investment on the short-term rental, so I can guide client through the whole journey if they would like to hire me as the real estate broker.
Awesome. And so, yeah, that's unique, right? And just for each of us, just think of the ways in which we can not just kind of hold that in as who we are, but make some kind of compound expression of who we are that actually serves our clients. So I want to move on to our functionary. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. Functionary versus fiduciary. So let's dig deeper into the last comment, fiduciary. We discussed this way back on day 2 in Real Estate Expert. When you operate as a fiduciary for your clients, you earn the right to be their expert of choice. So who remembers the difference between a functionary and a fiduciary? Anybody want to chime in on that? I drink a gallon of
Fiduciary,
water. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
fiduciary is when one party has complete, they like put complete trust in another person, right?
Is a trusting relationship. Yeah. Anybody have any more thoughts on that?
Isn't it like a legal and moral obligation?
Yeah, we definitely have that, and that is absolutely too part of like the trust part of it too, is that we're going to be fulfilling those obligations with their best interests in mind. Okay, so a functionary has a specific task relationship with clients. They do the job by dotting the I's and crossing the T's, which is important. We have to dot the I's and cross the T's. A fiduciary is a high trust relationship with clients and always puts their best interests at the forefront, even before the agent's own. So building that trust, talking about communicating, providing your value to them from honestly, even just the first time we ever meet them, helps build that trust, helps build that rapport, and helps them feel like they're in the right hands for their transaction. So you've probably heard this, but people work with people they know, like, and trust. Right? So that's always our goal. The trust part's in there, and knowing us and ideally liking us is part of that, or liking our service, the service that we provide. So look at your participant guide for the chart from MREA detailing the differences between a functionary and a fiduciary. Briefly go over the chart, offering some examples of a few of the distinctions. So does anybody see anything on there that you feel like you want to voice that we haven't voiced already? This is not a test. Okay, so dual agency. If dual agency is illegal in your state, well, which it's not, but for some states it is. But this is a great place to bring up the concept of dual agency, working for both the seller and buyer on a transaction. in the same transaction. Though this is legal in many areas, it's not advisable, especially as a new agent. Many infractions that endanger an agent's license stem from this practice. Being in a fiduciary relationship with your client means making all decisions based on their best interests alone. This is challenging when you are working for two parties with competing interests. Will your buyer expect that you're telling them everything about a house, even items that may not be required to be disclosed? Will your seller expect that the offer you are making on behalf of your buyers is their best offer, since you have knowledge of their pre-approval amount and finances? Which of our Y4C2Ts apply to not representing both sides, which I know we don't necessarily all have those memorized or sitting right in front of us, but does anybody have a thought on that from our Y4C2Ts? Does anybody know what those are? So, sorry, my screen has a little delay. But they bring up, so our code of ethics through KW, our Y4C2Ts, what they're saying represents not representing both sides is win-win and trust. Now, a little side note, I'm not saying, hey, don't take this into consideration what they're talking to us about, but I do feel like ultimately we're always aiming for a win-win. That's actually in our code of ethics. And so how would we not be working for a win-win just because of dual agency? I think that's the key always, right? So if you find yourself in a dual agency situation, I think the biggest thing that I've sort of had be my like deciding point is if I can truly say within myself that I'm not biased one way or another. And that if I feel like if I know that I'm biased, like maybe I've had, I'm just getting my clicker working. Maybe I've had an ongoing relationship with the buyer or the seller, and I just know that I can't actually represent the other side without being biased to one, then I'm going to refer it out. So just really think about it when you go. And I promise it's not worth the headache if it's going to be a problem. Okay, just making sure I'm not skipping a slide. So in addition, you owe confidentiality to both parties. How can you be sure you are not giving away confidential information, even accidentally? Here are some things that can go wrong with dual agency. Are you really prepared to negotiate against yourself? When negotiating inspection items, how will you make the seller's case to the buyers that the HVAC system is in working order and therefore should not be repaired, while telling the seller that the system is close to the end of its useful life and therefore should be replaced or covered by a seller-paid home warranty? Both are legitimate representations of the same issue. They just come from different perspectives. Would you ever go to court against someone who shared your attorney? Would you feel like you were getting the best representation possible while your lawyer spent half their time working for the opposing side? We're more honest than lawyers. Just joking. I don't know if any of you have a law background, but if not, refusing to do dual agency may be the best course of action for you. So many agents will work both sides of the transaction. However, it's something to think carefully about, especially as a new agent. If you make it a practice not to work for both sides of a deal, you can add that to your value proposition so that your clients know they will always have your time, expertise, and honest advice throughout their transaction without any competition. Okay, so setting expectations. So we've talked about 3 levels of service and revisited being in fiduciary relationship with our clients. You could see those as the what of being a great agent. Now let's talk about the how of being a great agent. How you reach the 3 levels of service for your clients is largely about communication and education. As a real estate agent, you are immersed in buying and selling houses every single day. And even if you're not having transaction stuff every single day, your head is going that direction, right? You're learning insights that the typical kind of buyer and seller aren't. They're just not plugged into. Is your job, it's our job, and for a lot of us, it's a passion as well. For our clients, this is something they may never have done, or maybe it's been a long time. Like we had some relocation buyers that had lived in the same house for 25 years in, the Bay Area and then moved up here, and that was their first house and moved up here after 25 years, and a lot's changed. It's a different state, so there's different requirements, and it's not something that the process was fresh for them either. So think about that too for people who just haven't done it for a long time. Even if they're a repeat buyer or seller, they're unlikely to do this more than every 8 years or so, according to NAR statistics. And the stakes are huge. For most of us in the United States, our homes are our single biggest asset. Therefore, you are going to demonstrate your expertise by educating your client on the realities of the market, as well as their personal real estate process, and you are going to do it often. To do this, first, you need to set expectations for the process and for communication. Okay, so review the transaction process. A key component to educating your clients is to review the entire process. You've likely already touched on it during your buyer or listing consultation. However, this is a complicated and emotional process that people don't remember everything the first time you tell them, especially when it isn't in proximity, meaning they're not like about to transact or a piece of the puzzle isn't about to happen, right? So we might go over the whole thing when we first talk with them, but if it's months from then, before they actually get into contract, especially if it's months, they're probably going to need a reminder. But even throughout the process, they might just be hyper focused in the very first stages and making sure they're getting everything put together in that way, or things are getting underway and they're not remembering what the next steps are. So remember that each step, they really might need that reminding the whole way. This is true for almost everything in our lives. If I ask you what you're having for dinner a week from today, would you know? If you don't, are you worried that you won't have an answer? Of course not. That meal is not near your needs right now. Right now, you're much more interested in your next meal, picking up your dry cleaning, getting a present for your niece's birthday this weekend, or a million other things. It's the same with the buying and selling process. So in setting expectations, for example, if you told a buyer they need to get out to see properties the same day they hit the market 2 months ago, when they were focused on getting their down payment together, they likely won't remember those details. If you are now setting up their search, you should update them on how quickly the market is moving in their desired neighborhood and price point. Make it clear why it's important to shift their schedules around to the point of inconvenience to see a house that fits their criteria. At the same time, you'll also need to remind them that if they see a house they like, they need to put in an offer right away. Now, of course, this is a little bit different depending on the market of the moment, but that's where us as professionals and keeping our head in and being engaged in what our market centers are offering, and knowing what the market's doing helps us serve them right in the right ways. I mean, one of the little tricks that I've heard somebody talk about or that I've used myself is sometimes we'll get asked like, well, how's the market doing or how's your business doing? And a good way to learn more about why they're asking or what they're really wondering about is to say, well, it depends. And you can either ask them more about, why they're asking, but also it's a chance to demonstrate that it's a dynamic market. They're not going to actually hear as expert of advice from a headline as what you can give, because it depends on the type of house that they're looking for, or it depends on the type of house that they're selling, or the exact area, the exact town within a region. For it depends on the price point, right? So even if we could say a blanket statement right now that houses are moving a little bit slower, we have kind of a balanced market, and that's different than, let's say, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there's still price points and there's still property types within that maybe you don't have like the time to just wander around without making a decision. Or maybe there are other price points and property types where you can go in negotiating pretty hard because they don't have as much competition. So just to give 2 examples, like in my market in Southern Oregon, something like a house that's, let's say, 300,000 and below, that's in a reasonable area with like reasonable finishes and could potentially serve the biggest buyer pool that we have around here, will behave much differently on the market than, like a listing we have for 900,000 that's in a rural setting and has some pretty specific qualities to it that has a very specific kind of buyer pool. So it really depends on what you're working with, and that's an opportunity to have a deeper conversation with your potential clients. So the same goes for sellers. So we were talking about needing to set expectations and talk about what would be required of them as buyers, but then also for sellers. And just because we've covered how chaotic the first week on the market might be during the listing presentation 2 months ago doesn't mean they remember. Reiterate how important it is to be flexible for showings. For most people, it's very rare to have to make such big decisions in such a short period. Prepare your clients for this change at their day-to-day pace. This is especially important as you get to the time-sensitive portions of the contract. Often, contracts require an answer within 24 hours, if not less, in a hot market. Therefore, you should make sure that your seller knows once the house hits the market, so they will respond to your texts and calls immediately. Remember, you're always staying in communication and setting and reiterating expectations for the process. I know that what I'm about to say is in some of our material, but I just want to take a moment to remind, in the spirit of speaking to clients in the way that works best for them, part of something we can help ourselves with in the communication front is knowing how they like to be, what platform they like to be communicated with. Do they prefer texts? Do they prefer emails? That we have some that prefer emails, or do they need to be called? Or is there a combination of those that needs to come in a hierarchy? If they don't respond to an email, do they need to be text? But just finding out how that works for them puts you in a position to better help them through everything we're just talking about. So you will likely need to go over the contract before you ever see a house with your buyers and before showings begin with your sellers. By going over it now, when there isn't time pressure, they will have some familiarity with it before they need to rush to put an offer in or quickly decide on acceptance. At each stage, you'll review with them where you are and where you are going. So in addition to the contract, okay, that we'll use as a purchase contract, what are some other documents you'll need to go over with your clients in our market? So what it's asking is, what other documents might be involved in a transaction, or what other pieces to the transaction might have a document attached with it? Anybody have thoughts on that?
For the offer, you need a pre-approval.
Okay, so pre-approval, right? I sort of, yeah, so go on, sorry.
And during the transaction, you need a home inspection report, for example.
And then what is related to a home inspection report that we might not have an actual home inspection report to show buyers before a transaction starts. But what are some common documents that they might might see because of an inspection report that we could go over with them? Or like on the heels of an inspection report. And sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just asking anybody.
It's okay.
So like a repair addendum, for example, is something that we might want to familiarize them with, and the components of it, how it works. And if it's something like are not familiar with, do yourself a favor, like start right now. And if you like paper, print stuff out and make a binder. To be quite honest, I do a lot of digital work, but and you know, this is probably has to do with my age too, but I do a lot of digital work, but at some point I like really need to hold something, and I need to feel like I can I need to see a bigger picture than just like being able to look at one document at a time or something like that. And so you might do yourself a favor and think about that transaction timeline that we've pictured up here on the slide, and that I think you have that in your participant guide, and maybe go through your documents that we have access to and think about what documents apply to each of those stages in there. And even if you don't have clients to talk through that with right now, become familiar yourself with the different pieces to it, so that when you're talking to clients about it, it's not like your first time looking at those too. Now, no judgment there. I'm almost always coming from like I've experienced the pain of doing the things that I say not to do. So take it as advice that you don't want to be feeling like you don't know what the documents are talking about when you're talking with your clients. So okay, let's keep moving along here. So set communication expectations. So set expectations for communication. Some agents feel they can never turn their phone off or take a day off. That's not a way to live your life. If you will turn your phone off at a certain time each evening, make sure your clients know this. If they are aware you won't get back to them between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., they will not be looking for a reply during those hours. Let them know that you will check your messages first thing in the morning and after, and attend to anything they need then. This goes both ways. Be sure to find out how your client prefers to be communicated with. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Do they hate texting and prefer phone calls? Should it be a group text to both spouses, or does one work overnight and prefer not to be texted when they are sleeping? Do they have children who need homework assistance at dinner and they prefer not to be disturbed from 5 to 8? And honestly, there's always something that we could probably be working with that's similar to those ideas right there. And an important part is getting to know those aspects of the people's lives you're working with, you become part of their like life ecosystem, right? And ideally you're helping that ecosystem not get thrown off balance just because they're getting into a transaction. So working with the details of that ecosystem and making a note somewhere. So hopefully if we're not using command at a high level for tracking our leads and our clients, hopefully we're using something at a high level to track some of those details, and then thinking about what finding out that information looks like. Is it a form that they fill out? Is it a questionnaire that you have that you're checking some boxes when you're talking on the phone to them? But think about how you're going to find that information, and then how you're going to store it, and what you're going to do to keep yourself familiar with how each client wants to be communicated with and how we behave in that way. Sometimes my slides are delayed, so I'm actually I'll switch the slide as it lets me, but I'm gonna move on with what we're talking about. So set contingencies, that's number 6. That's the slide I'll get to when it lets me. What will happen if a home comes on the market that is perfect for your buyers the weekend your sister is getting married out of state? Have a plan and communicate it well in advance. For example, if the wedding is on May 1st and you start working with these buyers on March 1st, you already know about the wedding. Communicate it when you meet, after signing the agreement, and in clear intervals leading up to the date. Be sure they know you have a colleague who will cover the showings if needed. As a listing agent, perhaps your sellers will be out of town and unable to respond to offers on a particular weekend. Get that information well ahead of time and put it on the MLS so agents will know they need to provide a longer response time on offers submitted during that weekend. So this is just going back to making sure we communicate what affects our service with our clients or may affect it, and that there might be an alternate way that they are served, and understanding what's going on in their life, so that if it affects their ability to have a transaction happen smoothly, that we're aware of that and have a game plan for it. So also let your clients know when communication needs to change. For example, you will adhere to their 5 to 8 p.m. no calls rule unless necessary once they put their home on the market. When time is of the essence, we all must act quickly. Make it clear to your clients when that turnaround becomes a primary concern to the success of their purchase or sale. The details should be shared early in your relationship so everyone knows what to expect. There we go. So 7, set up-to-date market expectations. So this is, again, what we're talking about making sure we're plugged into what our market's doing and our areas. So I don't know exactly. I think most of you are north of me and in a different MLS. And my MLS does a statistics and a market breakdown by town within each county and gives some stats on what's happening. And that's one way to stay current. It's a monthly update. I don't know if RMLS, the letter R MLS has, I forget if it has a breakdown like that, but by whatever means you can, stay up to date in what the market's actually doing. I've actually heard, and I don't currently do this, I would like to, but I've actually heard of setting a search for yourself within certain parameters, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Let's just say I have a particular niche of sellers that I'm serving. I might actually just be doing upfront kind of tracking where maybe I set up a search through the MLS for myself that alerts me to, let's just say for some reason I'm really wanting to track. So I live in Ashland, I serve in Ashland, and of course the greater Southern Oregon area. But let's say I have a niche of wanting to serve clients, seller clients who are selling in Ashland between the price points of $800,000 and $900,000, dollars. And I want to set up a search for myself that will alert me as to everything going on in that price point in that region, even if I don't directly have a client in that particular niche that I'm serving at that particular time. I can set up a search to be alerted on what's happening in that price point. So when I do have those clients, I actually have a working up-to-date knowledge of what's happening in that niche. So just consider that for any particular niche you might have or set of clients, or just for keeping up to date on maybe different property types and different areas. So updating your client's view of the market is another way for you to show your expertise. They need to understand the realities of the market they are in. Is it a seller's market or an extreme seller's market? Are house sales slowing down to become more of a buyer's market? National trends in housing are often on the news. However, that doesn't mean your clients are paying attention or that the trend nationally is the same as your market. So that's part of what I was talking about earlier. Set clear intervals in which you will re-educate your clients on the current market. A move from a median of 60 days on market to 45 can have an extreme impact on how quickly your client will find or sell a home, and therefore on the plans they have surrounding that sale. Be sure to translate what the market means to them. So we're not just, ideally, we're not just giving them data, right? It's on the market for, it went from 45 to 60 days, but think about what that means. We can translate what that means on the front end for them. In an extreme seller's market where houses are going for an average of 10% over asking, should you be looking, if you have buyers, should you be looking at the top of their price point, right? So that's an example of, if we have data to work with, like we know that houses are selling for 10% over asking, what affects our buyers is whether or not they can actually afford that, or whether or not they're going to actually win in a highly competitive situation like that. And so that might change your strategy of finding them the right home at that particular time. Maybe you need to be looking at homes that are a bit under what their top price point is. In that market, explain that you are setting your buyers up for success by showing them houses below their price point that they can go over asking on. Know what wins in your market and communicate that to your clients. Does anybody have any sort of examples of when you had to sort of reroute your strategy of working with a buyer based on what the market was doing, or just what ways in which you communicated something to your buyer that maybe set them up for a win?
I think we're all pretty new here, so I'm not sure many of us has had any buyers or sellers.
Yeah, that's okay. I know some people have, so I just want to give an time for people to talk. But I hear you, Stacy. So I know not everybody's had that that chance yet. Okay, so set expectations seamlessly with your KW tech. As usual, KW has technology you can leverage to help you show your expertise clearly and consistently, and keep your clients up to date on where you are and where you're going in the process. Utilize the custom checklists and smart plans in opportunities and command. Market updates can be a part of your custom checklists and smart plans. We will cover checklists more in our contract to close session. Share your KW app and be sure your buyer and seller guides are up to date and in sync with the current market conditions. For example, in parts of the country where national disasters have made home insurance significantly more expensive in recent years, perhaps you move checking for insurance quotes up in your buyer's timeline from post inspections to during the inspection and due diligence period. If your market is slowing down, you may put more time early in your seller timeline for home staging to be sure the house will show well in the first days on the market. And really quickly, so 2 items you should input into your checklists and command are to ask for reviews and referrals. So let me just add a little piece of, well, this is all a lot of information. And so like, if we want to talk about proximity and retaining information in general, right? We're looking at that as it relates to us dealing with our clients. Well, I'm also aware that as we as agents are figuring all of this out, some of this isn't an immediate proximity for you, or hasn't always been for me. So think about some key takeaways, and I want to just give you one thought on the whole timelines thing and maybe moving pieces to it, is that if you have, let's say, a multi-step inspection property. So for example, a property that has a well, that has a septic, and then it also has a house that you're going to be doing a whole house inspection on. And then there could be some other pieces involved. Maybe, I've at some point had people pull soil samples, and they might want other parts of the property checked on, or maybe it's potentially in a flood zone, or back, and that has to do with insurance, or back to other types of insurance. The key takeaway that I want to express here is I always think about my buyer clients, and the fact that they are spending money in this process for each of these checkpoints. So you may want to, I'm going to have to get up again for a second. So you might want to think about staggering the inspections they have and are paying for in accordance to what's most important, right? So if knowing the well flow and whether it has water on the property is of utmost importance to whether they're going to go forward or not, and especially if there's any question, like if the sellers maybe think it's a kind of lower producing well, you might want to move that up front before anything else, so that if they pay for that, they're not also paying, upwards of, sometimes with some properties, they pay $1,000 for a home and a whole house inspection that they maybe wouldn't even end up needing because the deal died at the well flow. So think about those pieces and what might be most important. I need to just grab a charge cord for a minute, so I'll be right back. But think about that for just a second. So even for properties that don't have a well and a septic and all of that, buyers are often still at least paying for an inspection and an appraisal. So if, let's just say, just on those notes, if there's, well, let me back up for a minute. So I've had lenders who seem to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulders with some kind of beef with realtors, feeling like they're unnecessary because the lender is doing all the work with the buyer. But anytime I've experienced a lender kind of behaving that way and coming from that premise, they're only looking at the one leg of the transaction that they touch, which is they have a certain interface with the buyers, and they aren't seeing the whole picture of what's involved necessarily. So we are still the authority on what's happening in the whole transaction and how that affects our clients. Even if you have a particular lender working with buyers who feel like they're really dialed in and that they've got all the answers, you are the authority still. You're seeing a bigger picture than the lenders, and that all affects your clients. So for example, maybe not, this isn't as extreme as what I was talking about, but I work with some lenders who sometimes like they just are like so like horse blinders on exactly what their job is, which I love. I like them to be high performers and want to get stuff done, but maybe they'll just order the appraisal right away because they're just thinking about their one track that they need to have done, and we haven't even had the inspection yet, or my clients haven't had a chance to actually look at it yet. And I'm not going to let my buyer clients pay for, again, another up to maybe $1,000 appraisal that they don't get, the money back on those things if it occurs, if they haven't had a chance to truly check out the inspection yet. Now, on rare occasions, maybe you'll have a client who doesn't care, but some of them aren't thinking about all those like little details and pieces in terms of like ways that they could avoid spending hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, if it's possible it's gonna have a detour like at a sooner period of time. So we as professionals can provide that protection, that layer of protection for them, and be mindful of their money, even in those little sort of parts to the transaction. So, okay. So let's move on. So 3 steps to gaining referrals. You might be thinking, we haven't even put in an offer on a house. Why am I asking for reviews? And referrals. So they show that we provide value, ask for help, and that we reward that. They might be explaining more in this as I read, but what they're talking about right now is potentially asking for a referral before you've even put your buyers into a contract or your clients into a contract. From the beginning, tell your client, throughout this process, I'm going to give you amazing service and earn your trust so that you'll want every member of your family to work with me. 68% of sellers who used an agent found their agent through a referral by a friend or family member. There are 3 simple steps to gaining referrals. 1, provide value, provide stellar service. Provide education, advice, and care. Just what we were talking about here. 2, ask for help. Let people know that your business is based on referrals. Your Conversations book has some great, easy ways to ask for this help. It can be as simple as, I rely on referrals. If you know anyone that is looking to buy or sell, I'd be so grateful if you could let me know. People don't know what you need unless you ask for it. 3, reward. Reward for the behavior of a referral, and don't just wait for a closing of that referral. As soon as a client or other member of your sphere of influence tells you they gave out your information, mentions you on social media, or someone calls based on their recommendation, thank and reward the person who referred them. Send a card with a gift card for coffee. Take them out for coffee. or better yet, send a small gift to their office where not only will they feel appreciated but others will see it and might ask about it. So reviews. Finally, ask for reviews throughout the transaction. Has anyone in here done work on your house recently and needed plumbers or contractors? Or maybe you've moved and needed to find a daycare for your children or a new hairstylist or mechanic? Where do you start your search? Anybody?
I always look at reviews. I rely on reviews a little too much, but I feel like a lot of people do.
Okay, exactly. I do look at reviews for stuff, but my husband especially is like, if we're gonna be looking at buying almost anything, he does this massive deep dive in research, and reviews are a big part of what he looks at. And services too. So having those reviews ourselves is something that can leverage our business into, it can position us when people are searching or have heard about us. It can position us as already effective for what we do in their eyes. And honestly, like this again is like not an easy thing for me that I have to work on, but especially if it's tricky for you, or if it's just something that you haven't got up and running for you because for one reason or another. But let's just say you haven't had a client yet, or I mean, this is what we're learning right now is suggesting that we ask for the reviews before you even close on a property. So if you're working with somebody and you feel like you're giving them great service, still ask for the review. But something you can do, I feel, is ask friends and family for character reviews. I mean, and they don't have to necessarily spell out, this is a character review. I've never worked with this person, but I mean, they do know who you are. They do know the kind of work that you're doing. They do know the type of person you're going to show up as for clients. So don't underestimate the possibility of even just getting started with character reviews from people who know your character.
I have a question about that. What is the best way to ask for a review? For example, Google form or email, or what is the best form?
If possible, to send a direct link to the platform that you want the review to show up on. That's the best idea. I've heard that like having a Google Business platform or page, and there is a spot for reviews on that, is one of the better places to have it. But I would say the best way is the one that we use, right? So sort of like our CRMs and how we keep our contacts. I mean, any way is better than not having a way. And think about where you might spend most of your time or feel most comfortable linking to share those reviews with somebody else too. So I mean, I have to say I'm a little bit of a stick in the mud when it comes to Zillow. I actually don't have a profile there, not one that I've intentionally set up. And I'm not saying that's how you should be, but basically it's a platform that I don't use. It's possible that does me some harm on some level, and I have ideas about that. But basically, if I feel that way, I know I'm not going to be using that to try to show clients who I am. So I haven't really built that out. I haven't really collected reviews in that section, but I do use Facebook quite a bit. So consequently, my Facebook business page is the place I have the most reviews on, and that's the one that I use the most, right? And plan to use. I'm probably going to be changing that to be a Google review. But start with where you use a platform you use the most or plan to use the most.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the most important thing you can do to get reviews is familiar, give value, and ask. And when I'm talking about character reviews, you've already given value to people who know you. You've given the gift of yourself, right? To people who know you. So you should start your relationship by letting the client know that you are going to ask for their 5-star review, just like you did with referrals, and remind them throughout the process. So check out this request for a review. If your purchasing or selling experience exceeded your expectations, would you be so kind as to give me a brief review? I'd also like your permission to use this in my advertising and marketing. So they're just giving you a way to ask for it. Seller reviews. So seller-oriented reviews gain attention when they address things like the client's home sold quickly. They got their asking price or above. They were impressed by the service. What do you think are some other seller-oriented statements that would be persuasive in a client testimonial? So what are some seller-oriented statements that would be persuasive in a client testimonial, do you think? We're just brainstorming.
Good communication.
Okay, good communication. Yeah, especially if somebody can draw a specific piece of that made like a vital difference for them. Okay, so good communication is something in there. And honestly, like, I feel we can even give people some talking points for review too. Like if you want to make a little outline, so even if you aren't using something like Google Forms, but if you want to make a little outline of like, you know, when you ask for a review, you could even suggest things that are helpful or your thoughts on these subjects, right? To be honest, like the less friction the people in our lives have towards doing, towards acting, towards doing things, the more likely it is they're going to do them, right? So that goes for reviews too. Like if we can provide some talking points for them that they realize would be helpful for us, and that's what we're asking for, and they believe they can help with that, and then we can like link directly to where we want the review, that cuts down on the friction on what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. Okay, so same with buyer reviews. Okay, so buyer-oriented reviews persuade when they say things like, the buyer found their perfect home quickly. The agent negotiated a great price. The transaction went smoothly. They were impressed by the service. So anybody have some thoughts on buyer-oriented statements? Some other buyer-oriented statements that might be persuasive in a client testimonial? So like smooth transaction seems to show up in all of them. The biggest negotiating pieces in a real estate transaction are time and money. Okay. And honestly, like any review that speaks on one or both of those is effective because it speaks directly to two of the biggest factors in how a transaction transpires. But then there's also, if you want to think about like condition of the property, obviously they're not reviewing what the condition of the property is, but we could think along the lines of what might a buyer or a seller say about that. It's probably related to repairs or not, right? And whether aspects of that got negotiated one way or another, depending on whether we're dealing with sellers or buyers. And then the smooth part of a transaction, there are really truly a lot of pieces to the overall process. So just having your systems dialed in, and honestly, even if you don't have your systems dialed in, but you are like 100% engaged every day to make sure like you're understanding what needs to happen next, and you're communicating that, and you're the system right now, that helps it be smooth. And there's always more to learn and keep doing. But think about like what types of topics might really affect how a buyer or a seller thinks, and time and money are two big ones. All right, so any ahas from stuff we've been covering? If you don't want to share it out loud, which I am inviting you to do, but if you don't want to share it out loud, go ahead and write it in your participant guide so you have it for later. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going. So looking at our agenda some more. So we've covered a lot so far. From dual agency to reviews and referrals, most importantly, we've talked about the key ways to create happy client relationships, consistently and clearly communicate regarding the current market and the process of buying and selling. Now let's specifically talk about what buyers need from you. So looking at this chart, 52% are asking for help finding the right home to purchase. And this is coming from the these stats are coming from the National Associates of Realtors. And I think this is very interesting because buyers have these days at their fingertips access to online sites that show them the houses that are available. They aren't 100% reliant on us putting that in front of their face. So it used to be that way, honestly, before my time in real estate, but it used to be that way for agents and for consumers, that it was that part of it, seeing what's available, was 100% reliant on the agent. That's different now. So what I feel like, so what our job then in helping, I mean, so 52% are still wanting help finding the right home to purchase, which to me means sort of the back office part of that, right? So them seeing homes online is kind of the front end of their experience. And we don't have to cause that to happen. That happens in today's society. What we can control and help with, like, immensely, is walking through, getting to know them and getting to know their goals and what's going to actually be a win for them in the process. That's where being human, like asking questions, dialing in the service and the standards of your service that you're going to provide, delivers them to their right home, right? Matching what's actually going on inside of them and what their goals are to what's available. Don't underestimate that part of it. That is a huge part of our value. And that's a huge part of the work we can do to help them with that. So 13% want help negotiating the terms of the sale. 11% want help with price negotiations. And then 24% want other. So in that other category, 8% want help with paperwork. It's not a very big percentage. 6% want help determining what what comparable homes we're selling for. And 4% want help to determine how much home the buyers can afford. That doesn't equal 24%. So there's something they're leaving out there, but so buyer needs analysis. The first step in stellar buyer service is being aware of their needs. You should have conducted a thorough needs analysis with your initial buyer consultation leading up to your signed agreement. If you didn't, it's your first step post-agreement. Revisit this process in your notes from session 14. Why should we revisit the needs analysis with our buyers? So let's just think for a second. So what's important? Let's think of it this way. Not just like why should we revisit it, but what is important in providing the highest level of service we can for us to revisit their needs analysis with them throughout the process. How does it affect us, and how does it affect the service that we can provide for them?
I think revisiting like periodically throughout the whole process can help with things that the buyer necessarily didn't think of at the beginning as you walk through different houses.
Okay.
They're like, oh, I like this. Oh, I didn't think about I wanted this size of closet instead of that size of closet. Because I think overall, like I have a cousin, she made a purchase on a home and she hates her home. She didn't think
Okay.
about it at the time, but the living
Unfortunate.
room, the downstairs is the majority of it is taken up by the garage, and there's no living space. And at the time, she just thought, "Oh, it's a big house. I want a big house,"
Mhm.
and bought it. And now she hates her house. And I think that would be the worst for, for our buyers if they regret their purchase.
Yeah, I mean that's a great living example, Shannon. And I will say that probably most buyers experience some kind of buyer's remorse because there's an emotional roller coaster involved, and at some point they close a chapter and there's not all the excitement part of it. There's like the part where we then have to like live with our decision type thing. And I personally, I feel like the word "the perfect house" gets thrown around kind of loosely because I don't necessarily, I'm I'm saying this as a perfectionist. I don't necessarily believe that we find the perfect house at all times and that that's what happens every time somebody makes a home purchase. Sometimes it's not about, I guess I will say I don't equate that with dream house, right? Sometimes it's just the perfect house for that moment in their lives. I will give you a small little thing that we can refer to a house like that is it's their benefit house. It might not be their dream house, but it might be their benefit house for where they're at right now. And that simple little term is something that clients have been able to latch onto and hold, right? But so there might be aspects like Shannon was talking about where actually aspects of the house itself maybe aren't serving the need. And revisiting some of the ideas around what they're looking for will help them clarify and discover something like that. Now, I'm not quick to blame agents for the agent should have done such and such better, and it's their fault that somebody, feels a certain way at the end of, after having bought it. But it is an opportunity that we as agents can show up at a higher level than what could be, let's just say, by digging in deep and helping our clients discover what's working for them. So it might be something about the house, but it might be something about their life that's changed. They might have one more or one less family member that's going to be living there than they originally thought. There might be something around them in the economy or in the community or in their family that's changed, that's causing things to go a little differently than how you started out. So things change, basically. Priorities change, circumstances change, environment changes, and we want to just be staying abreast of what is changing for them. And especially if it's been, sometimes we have some slow burn buyers who and sellers, but who maybe they raise their hand at one point for one reason or another. Maybe we know them and they're like, yeah, we're gonna buy or sell at some point, maybe this year, maybe in 5 years. But they raise their hand at some point and they have certain goals at that time. And then it's not until 2 years later or something that we actually get around to transacting. Well, a lot might have changed in that time, right? Or even a shorter period of time of months, not years. So just make sure you're dialing in, or even just starting the house hunt. Ideally, we really focus in on what they need and help in that discovery process. Sometimes we've kind of allowed the house hunting itself to be the discovery process, but I don't full on recommend that. If the more you can figure out before you get into houses, the better you're going to be able to serve them. But sometimes they don't know until they walk through a house and start really feeling it out, or do a drive-by of the neighborhood, right? So sometimes they need to just be in motion and they're learning. And so we have to just stay really keyed in to what's working for them and what's actually not. Okay. So this is what I was saying, that buyers' lives change and their world changes. And those are the things that we're also keying into in terms of their priorities. So tough conversations equal fiduciary conversations. A thorough and frequently revisited and revised needs analysis is your greatest resource in having tough conversations with clients. Conversations about what they can afford, the realities of the market, timelines, and move-in ready versus fixer-uppers are strengthened by referencing the needs analysis. So we've had first-time home buyers who honestly, like, one particular set kind of stands out in my mind where they sent us this really detailed laundry list of all the ways in which their first house has to kind of show up for them and what's really important, which sometimes, by the way, are undereducated expectations on their behalf. And it's another way we can show up for them as the professional to help them realize that. Just as a quick, like, little side step. For example, let's think about a house that was built 20 years ago versus a house that was built 50 years ago. Let's just think about those two examples for just a minute. And I want us to think critically about what is inside the house, what makes the house function, what are major systems that are involved in the house, and what's the likelihood of a house that's 20 years old and the condition of those systems to a house that let's say is 50 to 60 years old and the condition of those systems. Now, I'm speaking of after having seen tons of inspection reports, and I know that you guys haven't quite seen that. So let's just walk through this together. So let me start by saying sometimes buyers think they want as new as possible, and maybe their price point dictates that a little bit as to what it is. And let's just say they have it in their heads that 20 years or newer is the right one for them, and they don't want to see anything that's like, let's say 50 to 60 years old. But let's just start by thinking about something like a water heater and an HVAC system and a roof. So those are, especially a roof, is a really major expense. I mean, that's something that that takes, you're going to be hard pressed to re-roof a house for under 10 grand, right? So, and that's a chunk of change. So if you look at a 20-year-old house versus a 50-year-old house, which one do you think is going to need a new roof first, possibly?
Well, the older house probably already had a roof redone.
Okay, exactly. And there's a lot of there's a lot of houses built with something like 20 to 30-year roofs. And if we have, let's say, a 25-year-old house, here's the thing, a lot of them have systems that are at the end of their lives, but maybe still functional. And so if we're looking at what our buyers, especially a first-time home buyer, is going to be looking at over the next, say, 5 to 10 years of owning that house, they might think they want a newer house, but to save yourself some time and finding the right one for them, we might need to talk about what a 20-year-old house versus a 50 to 60-year-old house looks like because of exactly what you just said, right? Some of those older ones, there's some specifics with some of those that we might need to look out for, but a lot of times those major systems have been replaced, and aren't the original and reaching the end of their life but still working, and so a seller doesn't want to replace them. It's something that, you know, the new buyer might have to deal with in the not too distant future. So that's just a thought, and that's not a law. That's not saying every 50 to 60-year-old house is going to be a certain way better than 20-year-old houses, but I will put a little special note on 20-year-old houses that a lot of the times those systems haven't been replaced yet unless they failed before the seller decided to sell. And most of the major systems within a house are reaching the end of their lifespan, and it's going to come up as being suggested to be replaced in the not too distant future. That's not all roofs, but stuff like the interior systems, so like HVACs, water heaters, some of the other interior systems. So just think about that. Your clients might not know that, right? They just think they know what they want.
I guess
Shannon?
I would kind of use an analogy, or like there's some people out there that will sell their car before it starts breaking down.
Mhm.
It could apply to houses, like, oh, I want to sell the house before I start having to make major repairs.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good idea around all of it. So yeah, think about that. And one of the morals of the story is there's a perception that that a customer is always right, but they aren't necessarily. I do want to say we always want to find the win for them around whatever they feel like they're needing, but it isn't always going to have the foundation in the thing that they think they're right about. So they might want a newer house, but it might like have a tendency to have systems that are nearing the end of their usable life, but that it also might be an inner dynamic of how they work or how their family works or what they really need, and people are complicated. That doesn't change once they get into like a real estate transaction. We're complicated people, and we don't always actually know what we want. And if we're working with somebody in a high trust fiduciary position and they can somehow like really key into like what we're actually wanting, and they know that they might need to get us through a hurdle of false expectations to reach what we actually want, if we have that kind of fiduciary like experience with somebody, that can be life changing. So we can show up in that way for our clients in a high trust fiduciary way by, yes, listening to what they want, listening to what they need, but we also want to assess what barriers might be to them getting there. And that can be part of how we show up with excellent service and getting them through those barriers or getting around something that is a false expectation to ultimately get them what they need and what they're looking for. Okay, so show homes based on needs analysis. Now that we've talked about how we can use the needs analysis to help our buyers stay on track and discuss some conversations we need to have with them, let's talk specifically about showing homes. Showing homes is a process like everything else. First, you need to find the home that fits your client's needs analysis. You'll find MLS classes to help you to do this. In terms of how we set up a search and search the MLS. You will also need to make sure that your buyer is set up on your KW app and show them how to search for a home and follow the buying process with your guides. And choosing the homes you will show clients, and choosing the homes you will show clients is based on their needs analysis and expectation setting. As we mentioned, in an extreme seller's market, you would not show homes at the top of your client's price point. You shouldn't show homes that your client would need closing cost assistance from the seller to purchase in that scenario. I just want to remind you. Once your MLS search comes back with suitable homes for your buyer, you will preview those homes so that you can choose the best properties to show your buyer on your first trip out. Remember, you are showing your value by sharing your experience. Is anybody out there previewing homes? And I don't mean necessarily just because you have a client that you're looking at homes for, but just as part of your familiarization with the market and what you're doing in this job and profession. Okay, well, it used to be part of, I don't know the current Ignite, the full program, as well as like when I went through it and originally I was teaching it, but it used to be part of kind of what we did as a startup, is go and try to preview like 10 homes a week. Now, some people get a little bit funny about allowing that, and I would never suggest choosing, like, if you don't have a client that you're previewing a home for or showing, don't choose houses that the seller is getting displaced for you to show up. But if you can find some vacant homes, especially if you feel like you're zeroing in on some kind of niche and you can find some vacant homes in that niche, you might want to go ahead and preview them and just get to know what those homes look like, and ideally get to know what kinds of conditions show up to your eye, right? You're not going to conduct a inspection on all these, but to your eye, what kind of conditions show up, what kind of finishes show up in certain price points, and get a feel for, like, when you start to get to know that, what starts jumping out is this house is probably overpriced. Being able to start discerning that by walking through a home and not just having to like do a heavy analysis like on through the MLS. An interesting kind of approach you could take is so there's 13 main areas that Jackson County, which is the county I live in. I serve more than Jackson County, but in Jackson County, there's 13 little towns. And I've always wanted to do a more intensive sort of study, both through the MLS and on paper, as well as in person, on, let's say, $350,000 homes buy you this in Ashland, whereas you can buy this in Medford, or you can buy this in Central Point. So like pick a price point and start figuring out what that buys you, in part by previewing vacant homes, what that buys you in specific areas. Just think about some ways that you can get to know your market, and previewing homes can be a really powerful way to do that too. Okay, so I'm actually gonna leave us at this for now and ask if we, I'm just looking through some of these slides, but if we have any ahas or questions, because we're about 5 minutes to ending time. If you feel like you've got some questions that you really want to ask before we go, or just have comments for the good of the whole.
Would you ever offer incentives for 5-star reviews?
Some people do. I'm just trying to think if there's any, for some reason, legal problem with that, which I can't think of any right now. You could always ask. I don't see why there would be any, but I'm not the final word on that. So if that's part of your question, maybe ask our PB division. But in terms of actually 5-star review, I guess I would be mindful of who you incentivize specifically for a 5-star review, but I have often seen that the way people ask for reviews in general is through an assumptive close. Rarely do I see people saying, "Can you leave a review?" They say, "You can leave your 5-star review here." And you can incentivize the action with a suggestion of the type of review you would like to see there, if that makes sense. I'm just going through, let's leave it here for now. So any other questions or thoughts that somebody wants to ask or bring up? Don't be shy.
I think it's kind of relates to oh gosh, the part where like what separates you from other agents and stuff. So if somebody's like selling their house and you know it's really overwhelming for them, like is it okay to offer to come over and help them paint a wall, or you know, clean up some trash around the property or something? Like, are those things okay?
I would just encourage that you just be really mindful of what works for you in each given circumstance, but what is something you would want somebody to refer you for too. So I'm not blanket statement saying don't do that. We've done like a lot of that kind of stuff, and sometimes it revolves around a seller, for example, not actually moving all their stuff out, and our buyers moving in, and there's just no way I'm going to have our buyer move it, like have to deal with the seller's stuff. So we show up and we get it done, even if that means our own sweat equity. But what I would encourage for the long term is if that's going to be you in some moments now, think in terms of developing the right relationships with affiliates, that as you move forward, your value is not just in showing up yourself, but knowing who to call for those things to be done in a way that's going to be up to the standards that you would like. If somebody's really in a pickle financially, and it's somebody you know and you trust, and you just really want to help them in that way, or otherwise just want to help somebody in those ways, I'm going to leave that up to you. But I would say think along the lines of what you want somebody to refer you for. Think along the lines of whether it's really something that's the best use of your time, and if you would want to have that be on repeat. And then otherwise it's going to be up to you. I mean, we've helped clients move. We've helped clients do all sorts of things. So, but it's not something I want to be referred for. I don't want to I don't want somebody saying, work with her. She helped pack our house, you know,
Hmm.
personally. Also, I mean, almost inevitably, it depends on the relationship a little bit, but man, I've known people who have like re-landscaped yards and all of that kind of all on their own dime. They've been the one with their hands in the dirt and they it seems like inevitably get burned on it too. So just really think about that relationship and that endeavor. We have time for one more. There are no stupid questions. Okay. Well, I just want to end with reiterating that who you are, what you stand for personally, where your values are, what you believe, all of that. Everything that makes you you is your most unique value proposition. And just finding ways to have that be expressed outside of your mind and in your client's world is going to be how you can show up in a way that stands out from everybody else. All right, I'm going to let you go. Enjoy your weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Rock.
you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Bye bye.
Bye.